Welcome back to the newest episode of Counsel Commentary. Today I have a fantastic guest, Robert Doig. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Nice to be here with Jonathan.
Thank you, thank you. First, what inspired you to become a personal injury and wrongful death attorney? What was kind of your background behind that?
So, my father had been in this area for a long time. I took the path coming out of law school of prosecution work. I was a local state attorney general and then went to Washington for a period of time as a federal prosecutor. They were, particularly toward the end of that, long, complex white collar fraud trials, for the most part, cases, investigations. And it seemed a natural fit to move over to plaintiff's work. So my father, Hal Doig, had left his firm, gone out on his own, and I joined him and learned the civil business. Um, and we have developed a niche, particularly in a few areas, specifically trucking and construction accident work, a lot of industrial accident work as well. And why? Because we have developed a friendships, relationships with several building trade unions in the Philadelphia area. And um, that's extended into each of these specific uh, fields, really. And we seem to have a lot of cases that come in trucking and a lot that come in industrial and construction accidents. And they try.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Can you share a memorable case early in your career that shaped the way you practice law today?
Well, when I got out, here's a memorable one. When I came back from being a Fed, I had my first civil trial in the 90s, I guess. And it was a medical malpractice, which I had never done, that went 6.5 weeks for an older person. And it ended up being a pretty large verdict for a older fella who had been um, he had shingles and they over medicated him and he ended up with a broken leg and several problems ultimately led to his death. And I thought, wow, over medication, 6-week trial, is this what these cases are all about? Are they that long? Because that's consistent with the time we were trying savings and loan and HUD fraud and the federal fraud arena through the fraud section of the Justice Department. Now, we just finished a trial in May that involved a pretty complicated, comprehensive set of facts involving a truck case where there was a fatality. Uh, a fiance survived, and she had severe back compression fractures, and their daughter was in the back of the vehicle that was totally destroyed when a truck made a unlawful left turn through a blinking red light down a ramp. And while she was not physically injured, she ended up having severe emotional injuries. So it was just compelling from both a legal and a medical standpoint.
Yeah, no, yeah, you can't put a price on health, so especially mental health. What is something most people misunderstand about your line of work?
I think one thing they misunderstand is we wouldn't take a case unless we really believed that there was a wrong, that these people are legitimate victims, and that there is a lot involved and a lot of investigation that goes into preparing a case to identify all of the correct defendants in their role in it, and then getting out others that didn't have a significant role that led to the accident. Pretty basic, but
Yeah. And what are some common mistakes clients make before hiring an attorney like you in these type of situations?
well, I think a significant one is that truck construction industrial accidents are incredibly complicated. They involve a lot of money. They involve spending money to investigate and then to prosecute the cases. It takes a lot of time to investigate here in a trucking, the federal regulations that apply, and then to go in and dig into the past, the violations committed by that motor carrier, commercial motor carrier, to know that whole driver's history, then to kind of look up the chain to, all right, so who selected that particular motor carrier? Was it a shipper? Was it an owner? Here in the southeast of Philly, what's interesting is we have a lot of industrial settings. We'll have refineries or just a number of large plants, industrial plants. These truck companies, for example, are servicing those plants. And it's amazing how those particular industries are directing, controlling those specific motor carriers and their drivers. A lot of people don't know that that's got to be a significant part of investigation. And
Yeah,
the same thing actually applies on the construction side in those specific plants. Why? Because you go into a plant, and you could have multiple building trades, multiple unions, non-union contractors involved. Often lawyers don't know what really happened. It takes a while to find it out. One thing we do is we get on it right away, and we have, because of these connections, the ability to talk with other trades, other workers who were on the scene, even their contractors, to find out, okay, what are the actual facts? And things get covered up quickly, so you press to get photograph footage of the accident site immediately.
yeah, I can see the trucking companies being shady because they know the settlements. How do you handle cases that are emotionally difficult, especially wrongful death claims?
So that's a great question. Uh, they're very difficult, particularly the younger the victims. The last one we had, everybody was young. Fiance who passed, who I had, was young. His significant other was young, and obviously a young child. And uh, it's a traumatic experience physically. You're trying and emotionally to get them help often pretty quickly for their mental health, mental decline, is coming or is immediately there. That's one. And then trying to keep them fully abreast. Okay, here's what we're doing and why. I tend to be living with my clients to the point where um, I'm calling them a good bit, or my paralegals are, or my colleagues, if we're partnering with another firm. And it's great in most respects in that they're fully kept up to speed, but we're checking, tracking their emotional downside caused by such a traumatic loss. And then you got to get them help.
Yeah, it sounds stressful. I can imagine dealing with the families and the grieving. What's the most challenging aspect of proving fault or negligence?
Proving what which negligence?
Proving what's the most challenging aspect of proving fault or negligence typically?
So, all right. So take a truck case. Uh, there, it's showing. All right. So who had control? Well, what's the immediate fault? And you go to the driver. You go to the scene. We're finding in the truck cases, or at least I am, there are a lot of left turn accidents involving trucks. They have typically uh, 70 to 80, well, 70 to 76, 78 feet of truck making a left turn. They might be making it short, they might be making it without your basic L shape, right? Where they pull up and they go far enough into the intersection and they're making a left in an L-shaped pattern. We're finding they cut it short and they go in then to opposing traffic. That's so often the case. So you're proving, and then as we had in the last case, and we're seeing it a good bit, there are faulty brakes. For example, in the last one, we had a tractor that had not been inspected in 21 months, didn't have up-to-date brakes, hadn't been inspected such that there was over a 25% loss of efficiency function of the braking mechanisms. So that was a danger in and of itself. Then we looked closely at the driver's driving history, multiple violations. That carrier wasn't even active, for example, on a tracking by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration um, for commercial motor vehicles, which are 1,001 pound, 10,001 pounds and more traveling in interstate commerce. Um, so you're looking first at that, and that's what gets interesting. Then you have to go up the chain as best you can. All right, well, who are they driving for? And who is that shipper? How controlling is that shipper? For example, is the shipper setting the routes? Are they doing it for efficiency purposes? Hey, we want them coming back and picking up as many of the freight, goods, materials, whatever it is, bringing it back and moving them along. Do they actually track them through means on in the cab of the tractor, or are they following them, which we had in the last case? Um, and are they looking at their safety ratings? Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration puts out, it's called SMS, it's a safety measurement system. And they look through truck inspections on the road and or traffic violations and crashes, frequency of crashes, what kind of rating they assign to that particular motor carrier. So should they have been selected in the whole shipping delivering process or not?
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. So 70-80% is accidents from trucks are caused by going left turns.
It's about 61%. It's significant enough that UPS, for example, prohibits their truckers from making
Oh,
lefts. When you go out, just go look at it.
yeah.
You see a UPS truck, just watch them because at least they have a requirement that they're not to make lefts. Why? It enhances the risk of injury, and it's because of the tracking of the truck. Um, in this, yeah, the last case we had, we spent several hours just going down and filming, videoing the trucks that were carrying up to the limit of 80,000 pounds every transport. Um, we were watching and observing how they made those lefts. And we thought, oh, this could be another accident. Oh, that's going to be really close. And typically, the vehicles had to drastically slow down in the opposing lane of traffic or the lane of traffic where ours were. And they were very close calls and accidents. Why? Because it was a poor setup. It was not a controlled traffic light. One good thing, and this is in all cases, we hope, was that traffic light went from a blinking red light at the bottom of a ramp going out onto a four-lane highway where they had to look east and west and travel across four lanes and a divider to a full traffic light because of the number of crashes. All of that was brought into our case. And then another thing, for what it's worth, that's interesting is that behind every one of these cases, not all of them, but many of them, are a whole nother set of regulations. It could be specific to DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, state, or an EPA reg. It might be a hazardous waste that was transported. But typically, they're very intensely regulated in sub-industries.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I actually had about 17 years ago an accident. It was a truck, same premise. It was a truck going through an intersection. It was a long weekend. It was the first Monday, and they had been working all weekend. They were trying to get back. They never went through the area. It was a left lane through four lanes of traffic. It hit me and all the three witnesses, and like the guy just went through the intersections, red light, went through the red light and hit me. And it's luckily I'm like a really well built car, but say like literally what your data said. I'm like that was literally the scenario. So, but I should have hired, I didn't hire an intern. I used the insurance one and they're like, oh, 51%, you're 49. I was like, I just thought I didn't hire an attorney this way before I knew you should hire attorneys because I could have probably got a nice settlement out of it. And speaking of that, uh, what factors determine the value of a personal injury or wrongful death case?
So there could be a series of them. Uh, One is the economic numbers. Here's one interesting component in that. All right, so you're a driver, you're approaching an intersection. Tragically, um, you collide with a left-turning truck, and um, in our last case, the driver nearly was decapitated. However, he was breathing heavily um, in the minutes after. The issue became, all right, was he conscious or not of his slow and painful death? That gets into some very heady pathologic issues. We hired a expert in forensic pathology. Defense came in with theirs. But what's interesting, surprisingly, they look at for the pain and suffering component, and it's essentially also a fright component, even though in Pennsylvania we don't necessarily award for that. But it is, all right, you're approaching, you're obviously very anxious, you see what's unfolding, and then what are how long is your conscious suffering um, prolonged? And if the brain remains intact, there it is. You're slowly, in our case, this last one, it was a slow asphyxiation because the cervical injuries were so blunt and severe that they ultimately cut off oxygen to the brain. So it's a gradual death. Um, and that was a struggle for the defense to overcome. Why? Because the skull uh, did not show significant damage in and of itself. And we looked to a whole slew of factors to support it. You also look at the economic numbers. Obviously, you're projecting out, and that's difficult. How much would this person make? And we obviously want to be as positive about that for young people in particular. It's a lot easier when I have union uh, construction workers. Why? Because they're receiving a set wage. They have rates for not just a particular line of work, but also for uh, uh, medical, for pension, for annuities, for all sorts of other fringe benefits. Those are the basic numbers I would say we look to. And then if someone's married and there's a wrongful death case, there's also um, well, there are consortium related claims. Say that person wasn't involved in the accident. However, they have obviously a loss of all the services that the deceased would have performed. And then their children. In this last one, we had, and the child is because mom was still a fiance, they hadn't actually wed. the baby benefited. And then the issue would be, okay, so what is the value of the comfort guidance lost with his passing?
Yeah, it's a good breakdown. Thank you for that. How do you prepare for trial and how often do these cases settle instead?
So I'm finding more and more they're trying. Um, and we work our cases up uh, to a fairly well. And I'm just am going to trial in one next month where there have been several mediations. We've been in front of a trial judge. We're going in front of her next week again, and I think it'll try. And I would say at least half of the cases we have tried. That said, I had a truck case settle in the middle of a different truck case in the middle of a trial where we had worked it out pretty well, and they just didn't want to deal with the experts. And they want to see, honestly, a plaintiff who is straightforward, candid. And when they come over that way, I find the defense is that much more interested in settling a case if they find them credible.
That makes sense. What role do expert witnesses play in your cases?
They're the fundamental part of the case. When we have a construction case, we often go to the um, apprenticeship trainers in a union. Why? Because they're the ones who've trained these workers. And we're looking to, all right, what are the standards? And sometimes their industry standards are, most of the time, they're guided by OSHA regulations. Just like in the trucking cases, everything for the most part is set forth in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. Then you might even go further into, for example, if it was waste hauling, into the State Department of Environmental Protection regulations. So they give you standards. And those are what the experts use to put their case to write their reports. They serve as the basis. And they're, of course, they're drawing from the factual basis. In the trucking industry, just like in the construction, they come from typically safety backgrounds. We look for those who've been in industry settings. They are in charge of a fleet and they're the head of the safety department. And then they've gone out on their own and now they're doing consultings. Same thing in the forensic construction expert setting. You're looking for those who um, have worked in the construction field, know the specific area that we're into, whatever it might be, pipeline work, um, a whole slew of work, and are they acutely aware of the OSHA standards that apply and how they apply. So they're fundamental.
What approach when dealing with insurance companies that are resilient or resistant to paying fair compensation? How do you approach that?
Try it. You let them know you're going to try it, and then you try it. And uh, it is what it is. You don't get worked up about it. You just be ready to try. And I guess the best background I have was having been a local state federal prosecutor. So we're ready to try cases out of our firm. I tried several with my father on the civil side, and then we just prepare them as if they are going to try. We try to do settlement videos to some extent, but even those sometimes don't move the person in Chicago or the New York office in that insurance setting who are ultimately making the decisions, and you're not seeing those people. They're the higher ups.
That makes sense. Yeah, I could see Chicago being like that. That's where I'm from. So,
All
have you ever
right.
had to turn down a case that you wanted to take on?
Yes, often you'll have horrific injuries, and you're thinking, wow, this there has to be liability here. But we flesh those out, we dig in, we investigate, and we get to the core of it. And it's okay, is it a case or not? Is there liability? I see it all the time in the construction area. We have death cases all the time. Had one come in last week. Um, And all right, is this something that could have been, it should have been recognized, a hazard that should have been eliminated? Was it a distinct risk? Is there an OSHA violation? Who created that hazard? Um, and if we find a lot of it comes back to the worker and or his contractor alone, then we just decide, okay, we're moving on, and have to explain it in unfortunate terms to the family.
Yeah, that's got to be tough to deal with. Have you seen recent changes in laws or court rulings that impact these type of cases?
Um, well, I think the thing that's most worrisome where we are now, I think about it every day, is this. The federal administration has consistently set forth some very good, sound regulatory standards, safety standards, whether it be OSHA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regs. And those are what we use. That's what industry uses. That's what the law enforcement uses. That's what the Federal Department of Transportation uses to assess safety and then enforce it. The concern is with the pullback on so many of the regulations I'm seeing, for example, with the EPA and others, that it'll trickle down into other agencies, and that those standards will be um, literally affected adversely. And that's a significant concern to the public, the consumers, for drivers.
Yeah. If how has technology changed the way you gather evidence or present cases? Obviously, what AI is coming out, is that involved, or is there what technologies are you implementing?
So a lot of depositions are taken by video, um, and there's nowhere to hide in a video. When we are in the courtroom, often we're pulling up testimony, and it's on a big screen. It's interesting. I remember an expert in this last trial we did who was disputing some of the medical records, and we just said, "Is that your position?" Yes. And then we pull up the medical record that shows otherwise. Or perhaps it's a life care plan of the plaintiff's expert, and it's inconsistent with what that particular defense expert represented. Um, that is one. We're constantly using visuals, but it's usually through um, video, uh, and we actually will then use that to bring in the defense witnesses into our case in chief, and we confront them with their own video. I'd say that's the most significant new use of AI in so many ways. I'm trying to think of others. We, I mean, you have to use AI in your investigation as much as you can today. If you haven't, in terms of trying to explore what are the applicable standards, boy, that's a problem. If you haven't, in terms of running down a visual you want to create and provide an expert with, or a fact witness. We're doing it now actually in a model of a piece of equipment we're going to present to a jury in a pipeline accident, and involved what we call a serious misrigging of like a jury rig, a arbitrary chains, welded legs, inner and outer huge casings that were thrown together for an alleged purpose that any inspector and any safety person should have shut down in a heartbeat. So we're using a model like that. It's something that's becoming more and more fundamental in the courtroom.
Yeah, AI, I love AI. I think it just is. so fastly changing how everyone does everything day to day. What's one piece of advice you give to someone who thinks they might have a personal injury claim?
Well, the first thing I ask typically is, why do you think there's liability? What did they do wrong? How should it have been done differently? Um, and you'll find that they know or are very familiar often, for example, in a truck case with the intersection. Um, or they may know how this truck should track, how it was off tracking, and how, as it off track, making a turn, which again are big parts, big significant contributing factors to accidents. When you have a truck making a turn, managing space, looking ahead for hazards, there are all of those things. So you want to ask, okay, so what should have been done differently? How do you see he should have recognized this coming? Same thing in a construction case. You're looking and saying, all right, what did you do? How come you didn't recognize this as a hazard, yet you're saying that the owner, the safety rep, the inspector, the controlling employer should have recognized it? It's the first thing we usually ask of them.
What's the most rewarding part of your work?
Helping people.
Love
So
it.
when I started out as a local prosecutor, I thought, okay, I'll get this experience and move on. Somehow I was thinking, oh, move into maybe corporate setting. But uh, I tried probably anywhere from 150 to 250 trials, mostly jury trials. And it wasn't an intent as much to put bad people in jail as it was to help victims that I saw. And that's strange, I guess, as a prosecutor, but I enjoy helping people and trying to restore them as best as possible to function. And that's in particular construction accidents, what we're doing all the time. What brings us back is we're not just trying to right a wrong, but you're trying to get them the best medical care you can. A lot of them have traumatic brain injuries. Those are really hard. And a lot of lawyers struggle with how do you rehabilitate somebody? How do you get them to the right people that involve vision deficits, that involve concentration issues, and who are actually qualified enough medical practitioners to help restore function, as well as most of our people have neuroimplant stimulators in them, which are supposed to block the pain because it's so exquisite, so severe in going from the injured lumbar or other site to the brain. So you want to find doctors who are going to address that. And there we have several, and one we're going to trial with next month that involve complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS, used to be called um, regional sympathetic. Um, and it is a crushing injury that ends up causing um, intense pain that is more sympathetic in nature, and it goes throughout potentially the whole body. So you'll have a crush injury, you may have an amputation to a hand, a finger, but it ends up going up that whole arm or down a leg. And then it can actually, because it's sympathetic, you don't quite know where it's going. It means it's more central in nature. It goes to the other part of the body. And all of a sudden, you have somebody who they are in such exquisite pain, they are completely non-functional. And you're trying every means possible through these skilled doctors to try to get them out of pain or at least reduce the pain.
Yeah, you can't put a price on that. What's one case or client without naming names that you'll never forget and why?
Um, huh. Well, the one we just finished, sure, I'm going to remember that for a long time. But one case that come to mind is pretty recent. It was a truck case, And it was an incarcerated fellow who had been in long time in prison. And he got out, and you could see he was really trying to get his life together. Um, at least I believe that in watching him. He erred always on the exercise of complete integrity, honesty. So he was trying to better himself when he got out, and he was trying to first take immediate jobs from a halfway house, and then he returned to a building trade construction union. He had just been on it 3 weeks and was doing quite well, had a good projected future. Um, and they wanted to take him on the road with them. He didn't have a vehicle that could do that. And in that interim period where they had asked him to come back, he got hit by a triaxle dump truck, um, crushed his hip, broke his back, or at least severely injured his back, and put holes in his knee towards, we believe, his meniscus. It was really satisfying uh, watching him first and helping him, more importantly, recover as best he could. But the interesting thing was, like I said, had found in the end he was doing the best he could. He was on a cane, and he was struggling to get off the cane, and had a lot of surgeries and injections. All that said, what came through to the defense, to the opponents, and ultimately to a mediator, and most importantly to an insurance group of insurance adjusters, was his integrity. They liked him. Everybody found him very honest, notwithstanding he had done several years of incarceration and, in a major uh, criminal act. So getting him on his feet and ultimately getting an award for him was really self-satisfying.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. It's always good to hear people turn their life around like that. This is more on the business side of the question, and I was talking to Sal from Top Attorneys in North America. If you're a new or starting attorney, lawyer, what would be the best way to get new clients? Your perspective.
Well, one are trying cases and you get a $40 million result, um, whether it be a verdict or whatever. You had raised what are the economics that you seek in these cases. One of them are punitive damages, which is where there's reckless conduct, reckless disregard. For younger lawyers, it's recognizing when those cases are in, knowing that you have to go beyond the the policy limit that you first see. Are there other potential resources out there to explore? Um, and once they're doing that, I think that's how they draw in more cases. And they're willing to try. And to try them, you have to invest a lot of money, sometimes hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sometimes we think we're virtually a bank. All we do is write checks. That's
That's funny. But you got to invest in your business, just like all businesses, basically. You got to reinvest to make, get the right reward for the clients. As we wrap this up, what would be the best way people will contact you?
through our phone number, the 565-610-565-9565 number. I have a lot of others who call me somehow on my cell, but that gets everybody into the firm, and it seems to work in getting cases. The website's simply like a reaffirmation tool. We find
Yeah,
people just call in.
perfect. We'll put the links and the phone number in the show notes below. Thank you, Robert, for your time and your great insights. Thanks for being on the Counsel and Commentary podcast again.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Counsel and Commentary. This episode has been brought to you by the top attorneys of North America.